All right, so I am going to have our class sessions recorded. Zoom was being kind of weird this morning, so I just like, well, I'll record it some other way. So it'll be a non-live recording for those if there's anybody that's not here, and they won't know that until they find out it's not there. But I'll actually try to record every session so that, whether it's Zoom or Camtasia, so that if you're not in class, you can catch up on what happened in class. And even if you were in class, if you missed something, if it wasn't making sense, you can go back and maybe listen again, watch again, see what happens. It's just a screen recording, it's not my face, luckily. So you can kind of see what's here, you can hear the audio. And in general, I will have, once I get more of my software working properly, a little tablet so I can write on there. So the things that I'm saying, it's not just going to be on a chalkboard. It'll be visible for future reference. Depending on what sort, I might just have this posted directly in Canvas, or I might have it on YouTube, but I'll sort that all out this afternoon. In any case, what I did want to point out this, if you hadn't visited the Canvas site for a class before, there's not really anything in Canvas other than this page. I will probably host the videos there that I have recorded, whether it's a link to my YouTube channel for ASU or whether it's just directly posted in here. That's the only other thing really, other than potential announcements that they get sent right out to you, that's going to be in Canvas. The rest of your materials are going to be elsewhere, but I did want to take a look at the syllabus just to point out a couple of things. So let's see, so this is all in there. The course uses rationalreasoning.net website. That's where the online version of your textbook is, some additional materials that are like PowerPoint sorts of things. We'll use some of those in class and some not. And there's also your online homework. It's all through that same website. And so your grades are going to be there also, not in Canvas, so you're not going to get little reminders about assignments that are due there. But everything is all on the same website, including discussion forums for questions, which it's a really nice discussion forum, even though it looks like it was made 30 years ago. It works really well. And it's easy to get mathy stuff to show up in it, because it's hard to type math questions sometimes. This one will import whatever questions you're looking at if it's a homework related question, and also give you a way to type math stuff. But in any case, rational reasoning, if you follow either of those two links and you haven't enrolled before, you need to use this course ID 2826, and that's just to get you enrolled to do the homework that I assigned to you with the deadlines that I've given you, as opposed to if you have a friend in a different section of this class, they're going to have a different number and enrollment key there. That's their own homework and deadlines, which might be different times of day or slightly different. But if you do have friends in other sections, they're bound to be approximately the same. Our tests are, whether it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday class, that's going to be the main difference. But this course ID and enrollment key are what's going to get you into that site if you haven't done so already. I saw a bunch of you were already in there as of yesterday when I was looking. I didn't look this morning. Your pathways pre-calculus. This was typed here when they gave me the syllabus. I'm like, they don't have it set up yet. They don't have a schedule yet. So that's just kind of a placeholder something. We will have an actual link to follow once we have a schedule for the online tutoring. It'll probably be next week. But that's that online tutoring version of a tutor center that was specifically for this class. Just for Math 170 as opposed to the general math tutoring lab. The reason we have this is because that way it's a key class. There's a lot of you in it. We want people that are geared towards helping you and a lot of resources for you. So this Pathways Tutoring Lab, which, like I said, it will be just virtual because the lab space that they had was not really sufficient given spacing requirements. So it'll just be virtual, but it is full of instructors, grad students, IAs, additional tutors that have been hired on that have worked with the class before but aren't working with a specific section right now, a whole bunch of people. So we'll have a schedule that comes out. It'll probably be, like I said, next week or so for when that tutoring lab will be available to attend via Zoom. So let's see, prerequisites, et cetera, et cetera. The workbook information is there. If you haven't read the syllabus yet, there's 2 ways you can get the materials. You can order online, or you can just walk to the bookstore. They have copies of it as of yesterday, at least. They had copies of it available. It's this 8th edition, which I believe is brand new, so I don't think there's any used ones available. They updated a couple of whole modules in it, so don't get an old one. Plus, you need if you're buying a physical copy for the bundle purposes, which you need, there's a code inside the book, and if you get a used one, you can't use the code to access the online part, and you'd have to pay online anyway. So it's a bundle that includes just a book, and inside the front cover of the book there's a scratch off and see a magic code that'll get you into the online homework if you buy it across the street. You can also just go to the website and buy it online, and they'll mail you the book. Just be aware this time of year the mailing from the bookstore is a little slow because everybody's ordering everything and it could take a week or more. So probably faster to just go across the way if you can. But in any case, the workbook and the online access are what the cost of this is for. So again, there's the enrollment information. I think I talked about some of these course goals. Understand the central ideas of the course, prepare you for calculus, etc. You do want to have a graphing calculator. It doesn't have to be a Texas Instruments calculator, but that's the variation that I have, and I'm going to have a computerized version on here to show you how to do some things. Like I said, it's not that I want you to not be able to do things by hand, but the things that the calculator is doing aren't the things I want you to be focusing on doing manually. I want you to focus on the higher level thought process. Not all the computation, and not even necessarily graphing is great, but if you can kind of generally get the idea of a graph, visualize it in your head, have a calculator do the exactness of it, and then look at some other aspects of it without having to sketch it out yourself. The most value of what you're doing in the class isn't the stuff that the calculator is doing for you. It's the things that you have to analyze or interpret from that. So I don't want you to think that, oh, we're using calculators on everything, cool, I don't have to learn anything. No. Because we're using calculators, you're going to have to know other things. Let's see. So I think I went over this. So Canvas website, the Rational Reasoning website, and iMath. I'll show you those 2 websites in just a moment. In class, just kind of how we're going to be working this. Let me just show you the Rational Reasoning website. All right, so if you go to, this is rationalreasoning.net, and I just logged in already. It's auto logged in. Once you're signed in, if you go to rationalreasoning.net, you'll probably see a page that looks similar to this, where there's a bunch of things down here. Yours is not going to say instructor edition, but it'll look similar to this, where you can see the student edition and then the online homework. So the book part, this is the instructor version of it, but yours will look similar. Show you this nice yellow book. This is what the physical workbook looks like when you go to get this. So this page here has the book on it. So we're going to start with Module 2. Like I said, this class is also used in high schools, and it's like a August through May sort of thing. They've got 11 different modules. We're going to do modules 2 through 8 with a couple little things thrown in from 9, 10, 11. But those are more calculus topics that there's just extra time for in a full year. But we'll be starting with Module 2. This M2 is what I just clicked on to have this all expand here. So like I said, you won't see quite all of this. You won't see student and instructor. You'll just see the individual, just the sections. And I don't know if it says student or not, if it just says click here. But there's a text. There's some PowerPoints. There's things it calls homework and homework solutions. That's just like the in the book sort of homework. It's not your rational reasoning, like your iMath AS homework. And then this is Module 2. So this is 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc. These are investigations. So these are things that a lot of times we'll be using these in class. They're kind of along the lines of group work or kind of extended thought things. Sometimes we'll work on them in class. I might assign you to, hey, between now and Thursday, take a look at questions 3, 5, and 7 from investigation 4 or something, and then we'll talk about those in class on Thursday as a part of what we're doing to prepare for our next topic. So for instance, this is section, there we go, 2.1. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the topics of this today, but just so you know what this looks like. It's like, oh, okay, there's some reading, and there's a lot of terminology in here. It's like, huh. So it talks about identify two distances that are varying, identify two quantities that do this and that. So there's a lot, it's just a lot of thinking and not a lot of computing and writing down expressions and making sure you know what the meanings of those expressions are. So our overall goal in the course is to kind of move away from the, like, here's some stuff, here's a quick trick and I can get an answer, to the stuff that calculators don't do, to the, well, what does this mean? What do I need to write in order to help me solve this, whether a specific problem or a general problem like this? Being able to write expressions that explain general problems like this is kind of an underlying focus of doing computer programming. How do I set this up so that I can do this more in general and not just specific to one problem with one set of numbers? But it's also really the ideas of algebra. When you're solving an algebra equation, you think, well, what kind of number has to be here so that all of this is true? And if I have more than one unknown in it, that I just kind of know how those are related to one another, you can learn a lot of facts about the interrelation between a couple of unknown things by writing out the expressions and rearranging them. All these things that you've done and just kind of, okay, subtract the same thing from both sides and multiply everything by 3. Random tricks, there's a meaning to them, and that's what we're going to be focusing on in terms of how we use them in here, even if it is something that seems silly, like, oh, that's just like Algebra 1. Well, it is, but you probably didn't think about it as much then as I want you to now. But the workbook has pages that look like this. These are, if you printed this out, it would look exactly like the workbook, Module 2, Investigation 1. But, by purchasing it, you don't have to print out all of it and use up all of your ink and time and money. The cost of the workbook itself is essentially just the cost of all the paper and whatnot. That's the online access that has to be computer monitored and all that sort of stuff. That's most of the cost. But you can see, like, these investigations, they're several pages long. I don't know how many pages this is. Sorry, it's slow loading when it's plugged in to this. But they're not short. But all this information is here. So let me go back to this, the text that goes along with this. So it says, introducing rate of change from a covariation of quantities perspective. That sounds kind of like, if you just read it fast, like, wait, what are all of those words? It explains all of them in the text if you go through. But rate of change, okay, that sounds like maybe something you've talked about before. And if you read through some of the examples, sitting in the stands at NASCAR, determine the speed of the cars. Oh, speed, that's a rate of change. It's a rate of change of your position over time, like how fast you get from one place to another. And you can kind of figure, like, miles per hour, kilometers per second, whatever you want to measure things in. Those would be rates of change. These other mysterious words, covariation of quantities perspective. What? So covariation, variation, that's talking about something changing, right? And covariation sounds like, oh, there's more than one thing changing. Maybe they're related to, like, cooperation, a couple people working together. Covariation, a couple of things that kind of change relative to one another, or they're both changing and we want to talk about how those two types of change are related. Like rate of change, like I was just saying with distance and time. If I want to measure how fast something's going, I would need to know, if I don't have a speedometer to just look at and read a number off of it. If I'm doing it from scratch on my own, I'm like, well, I want to measure how long it takes to get from point A to point B. And if I do those two things, whatever units I'm measuring in, let's say it takes 3 minutes to go 40 meters. That's pretty slow. Well, I could state my rate of change pretty easily in meters per minute, or whatever I just said. 40 meters in 3 minutes, 40 meters per minute. Okay? But those are two quantities, and that was one fixed amount. But if I have something that's like, well, what if it goes faster than slower, then faster and slower? Maybe I have a graph of something's position relative to time. As time increases, my distance from something, let's say time's measured in, what was I using, minutes and meters. I'll say distance from starting point. So you started at your starting point, you'd be at 0. Well, if I'm going at a constant speed, maybe after, this is time in minutes, maybe after 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I've gone, let's see, 5, 10, that may make these bigger. I'm not going to do the 40 thirds because I don't want to make up weird numbers. I just want to make this something easy. So let's just say something close to that. So 10, 20, 30 meters. So after 1 minute, I'm at 10 meters, 2 minutes, 20 meters, 3 minutes, 30 meters. And those are just a couple of points where I took measurements. If I was actually traveling the same speed, like it's something just kind of trudging along very evenly, if I wanted to talk about the rate of change in meters per minute, I traveled 10 meters in the first minute. I also traveled 10 meters in the second minute and 10 meters in the third minute. So that sounds like 10 meters per minute. I'm writing those both half out because I don't want it to be m per m. But if that's actually true, that I was always going the same speed and it didn't just happen to work out that way, if I were going to graph this, maybe in between, like maybe at half a minute, I'd gone 5 meters, or at 1.5 meters, 1.5 minutes, I was at 15 meters, and so on. If it was all that in between, it was exactly the same, that covariation as time varied, which seems like, well, time just kind of goes. Well, okay, then time's moving on smoothly. It never changes rates. Time is the basis of a rate. And this distance relative to time, they're both changing. If they're changing at the same relative amount, that's a constant rate of change. That's what we mean. And there's a lot of different ways to explain what's meant by constant rate of change. But we don't have to have a constant rate of change. You know, you can speed up and slow down whenever you're moving. So can cars, so can anything else. Some things don't, just the way they're built. But constant rate of change is something that's a basis of, you know, y equals mx plus b sorts of things that you started learning in, I don't know, maybe 6th grade, 7th grade, whenever you started learning about graphing lines. But it's also the basis of calculus, understanding what a derivative is, which is about instantaneous rate of change, or rate of change as we look at smaller and smaller intervals of time. It all comes down to the same sort of computations and the same sort of relationships between a couple of different items. So in any case, apologies for video there, but in any case, this covariation of quantities, well, I was talking about covariation, what about this quantities? Quantities, I believe it's defined in the next paragraph down, in the sense of what we're talking about, quantities, think like, oh, it's some sort of number. Well, a quantity is something we're going to measure with a number. So I could talk about distance, but I want to measure it in terms of meters. So distance in meters is a quantity I can measure. I can assign a number to it. So, oh, distance in meters is 4. That means 4 meters is my distance. So a quantity that we're going to be talking about is something that has a numerical value or something that's measurable. But it's the concept is what we're referring to. So covariation of quantities, we're not talking about numbers varying. We're talking about measurable somethings, changing whether it's distances or times or pounds or heights or whatever else you want to measure. Lots of things we can measure and assign a numerical value to. Those are going to be our quantities, but we just need to describe them with, like, so they're going to have a thing, distance, height, and units. So distance in meters, time in hours, weight in kilograms, whatever you want your something to be. Those are going to be our quantities, and then we give a number to it, and then we can talk about how those numbers vary, but those numbers are associated with something. It's not just a vague number in space. So in any case, this is just the very top of this book part, but it gives you a little summary here of what's going to happen over the course of the whole chapter. And I'll go back to the syllabus in a second, but what we're going to talk about, what our official topic for today is, 2.0, overview, and 2.1, quantities and covariation of quantities. So I've kind of talked about that a little bit already, but I'm going to give you an assignment for between now and Thursday that's related to this, and also looking ahead a little bit to what's coming up next. So you can see this is all of Module 2. This is Module 2, sections 1 through 7. And all of this is different components of, or different ways that we need to expand our thinking of just quantities and covariation of quantities. Like, okay, that seems simple. We just talked about this. This is constant rate of change. It's a part of it, but there's a lot more details we can think about. So that's what we're going to be working on over the first few weeks of class. So let me go back to the syllabus for a minute. Details of grading later. I want to talk about the end page, our schedule. Here we go. So this is the last page, or 2 pages. Yeah, last 2 pages of the syllabus, front and back, are the schedule. So this week, today, course introduction, covariation of quantities. PCA diagnostic is going to be something to do this week sometime. It's an online, it stands for pre-calculus assessment. This isn't part of your grade. It is kind of for research purposes. We want to know where you're at now. We're going to have a post-test also. It's where you're at the end. It's meant to both just kind of generally get statistics, but see how well the class is doing at helping you understand certain aspects. So this isn't something like, oh, if, I'm going to have my friend help me with it. That's not going to have anything. So just take it, try your best, see what you do. It's in iMath AS also, and it's going to be due, I think, by Friday. But it's in iMath, so I'll show you there. But this is something that's actually just going to be due by the end of the week. I just wanted to mention it today. And then over this first week, between today and Thursday, we're going to be working on and learning about, and then you're going to be assigned over the weekend, things to do with the first, intro and first 3 actual sections of Module 2, which again is all about these quantities and covariation of quantities. So you'll see if you look through this, we've got Module 2 and Module 3, and then our first exam is not quite a month, I guess it's almost a month from now, February 10th, which, yeah, it should be 4 weeks from now, as this is, January 11th? That's Thursday, though, so, yeah, 4 weeks plus 2 days from now is our first exam. There's an exam over Modules 2 and 3, and you can, some of these you won't, box problem, what's that? If you look at the book, you'll see what it is, but it's just a particular investigation with a posed problem to start it off that's about a box. Chapters or modules 4, 5, and 6 are on exam 2, which is at the end of March. So about 6 weeks after exam 2, or exam 1 is exam 2. And then modules 7 and 8 are on exam 3, which is at the end of April, about a month later. And then that's right before the end of the semester. So you'll see exam 3 is on a Tuesday. We're reviewing in class on Thursday, and then your final exam, this is a Tuesday night. The final exam for classes like this, where there's a ton of different sections and lots of people taking them, they're not at your regular individual class times. This is one of those mass scheduled common final exams, and ours is I think that's a Tuesday. It says in here someplace because I knew it at the time. It's a Tuesday night, like from 7 to 9 p.m. And it's not necessarily going to be in this room either, because everybody that's taking pre-calculus is taking their exam at the same time, and there very well could be other pre-calculus classes that also meet it here. They tell us what room we're meeting in and finalize this about a month before the final exam. So I'll let you know later. It's not like I'm keeping it a secret from you. I don't know because classroom scheduling has not yet told us. But our exam is going to be a night exam at the beginning of May, and it's cumulative, covers 2 through 8 modules. And let's see, there's just one other thing I wanted to mention schedule-wise. Oh, gateway assignment. There's these 2 gateway things, says gateway 1 and gateway 2. Those are kind of review assignments. There's some review material that I'll be giving you that's over things like factoring and adding and subtracting rational expressions that are really from earlier classes, and I don't want to spend a lot of class time on, but we'll spend a little bit on. It's not in your workbook, it's kind of outside of that. But just to make sure you had a little bit of a refresher and chance to practice some of those again. They're related to material that we're doing in class, but I don't want to spend, I said, reteaching time on those. They're very, what's the word I'm looking for? Boring? They're not the fun part of math. They're the part that's just, yeah, you have to figure out how to factor these things and reduce them in order to progress on and be able to do something that we're doing in class. So those are kind of the underlying techniques, I guess, is what the gateway exams are about, some basic techniques that help you solve and progress in a problem, but they're not the most interesting parts, which unfortunately is why sometimes earlier math classes get really boring, because there's a lot of that to get out of the way. I mean, some of it's fun, like when you first learn multiplication tables, that's great, but they're really kind of boring if you think of it. It's like, great, now I know all these numbers. Sometimes you just have to learn some techniques and some underlying facts to make the interesting parts go more smoothly and be easier to get through. And these are some of those. There's a Gateway 1 that's due kind of mid-semester, and the Gateway 2 that's due towards the end. It's not quite the end because we've got a lot of other stuff like final exam and exam 3 right at the end. So it's a little bit earlier. But also it's related to some of the stuff that we're going to be doing with trigonometry, which is in modules 7 and 8 is where we're going to be doing the trigonometry portion of the class. So that's end of March through end of April. The rest of it is going to be other things related to preparing for calculus, which involves a little bit of algebra review, but more like algebra analysis, like figuring out what on earth is going on with some of these algebra topics that I know you've seen before and kind of expanding upon them. So let's see. Oh, I know what I wanted to do. I want to go to the iMath website just to show you some of the features of that. So the rational reasoning site has a link to iMath AS, as well as I think there's a link directly from Canvas, not quite sure. Yes, there was. I had one in there. Yeah, the rational reasoning website is right there. That takes you to the main page that has a link to this also. And yours won't look quite like this. It'll say you'll be courses you're taking, not courses you're teaching. But here, you should see something that looks like this with a calendar, and it's a useful calendar. Again, like the website looks clunky, like it looks like it was made in 1990. Although there weren't really too many websites in 1990 that had anything graphic in them. But it's really useful, easy to navigate. It just doesn't look pretty. That's all. So this learn the system, what this is, I do want you to do this. This calendar is, you can click on it, but you can see today is Tuesday the 11th. This says, let's see, Wednesday the 12th. If you click on this, it'll tell you what this is, learn to use the system. It's not for credit, but it's kind of to teach you how to use iMath AS, which it's basically just like any other math platform for homework that you've dealt with, in terms of there's things you can click on to get symbols, but you can also type them out. Instead of having to use a little math palette and click, click, click to try to enter things like square roots and exponents, you can also use the sorts of things that you've probably done if you had an older calculator, like the little caret key to make an exponent. You can do that. But this will teach you about that, and also about how answers are evaluated, in terms of if you need to answer something like square root of 7, type square root of 7, not 2 point whatever it is. But I'm just going to click on this. You can click on those to go to the assignments. So to get to this assignment, I just use the calendar. That's the easiest way to navigate here, rather than like clicking around and trying to find list of assignments. Say, oh, what's coming up? What's due? Let me click on this. Oh, learn to use the system. It's due 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. Cool. There's a bunch of questions here. Some of these are multiple choice. Some of them are not. These are questions about how the system works in general. But what I did want to point out, this question right here says, entering your answers to exercises. There are many cases where you'll be asked to enter the results of your calculations or an expression that represents your answer. Notice you get a preview next to each answer as you enter things. So to make sure, it says in the answer box below, enter the value of the sum 4 plus 9. So you could actually, let me just try this because I haven't tried it on this. If you type 4 plus 9, it says it's 13. Like, it does the computations for you. If you have an ugly expression with a bunch of weird numbers, you don't have to grab a calculator out and do it all separately and then put the answer in iMath. Most of the time, you can just type, if it's numerical, you can just type it right in the box how it is, as long as you can figure out how to type it, and it will evaluate it for you. It's like, oh, great. So I can submit this. Well, I didn't do the second question. If it doesn't show you something automatically, click preview and it will show you then. But notice this little yellow arrow here. That is how you get to like the clickable area. So if you want to click on a square root sign or click on exponents and stuff like that, that little yellow arrow will help you do that. But all of these, if I wanted to, like, let's say I wanted to get the wrong answer and I wanted to have something like the square root of 7 or whatever I had just said. I can type square root of 7 there, and when I go back here, notice it doesn't have that symbol in the box. It says SQRT parentheses 7. If you want to be able to type in answers without doing the click, 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 because I know sometimes that's annoying, especially if your trackpad's not working properly, you just want to be able to type it. By using that, you can see what you would have to type to get it in there without using without using the little math palette sort of expression. Now it says square root of 7, and it tells you approximately what that's equal to, which is not the right answer to this question. The right answer to this question would be 13, but as I said, if you actually just type 4 plus 9, I'm pretty sure this is going to say, oh yeah, I got the answer right. Yep. So type the answer to 4 plus 9. I type 4 plus 9, I got it right. You know why? Because I'm not really concerned about you doing the math. This can do the math. I want you to know what problem you have to solve to get the answer. So in this case, it was just a simple one. But notice that you can see it'll do the sum 4 plus 9 if you type that. Now, on the other hand, this question, which I didn't answer, was x plus 4. It's not going to give a numerical result to that because it doesn't know what x is. But I can submit it, and now it's correct. So I could have typed either 13 or 4 plus 9, or probably anything else I wanted, like 5 plus 8, 20 minus 7. As long as it's something that's equal to 13, that first one would be marked correct. It does have to be exact. So if it was supposed to equal square root of 7 and I put like 2.6, it would mark it as wrong, because 2.6 isn't exactly the same as square root of 7, but it's close. So don't round off answers, but however you get it is fine. And that should be reassuring. However like in a longer like story problem, there's multiple ways to approach something. And if you get some weird looking expression and someone else gets something that looks completely different, and you both type them in and both get them marked correct, it's because they're equivalent. And that should be reassuring. It's like, okay, I don't have to have approached this problem the exact same way as my neighbor. If we had different ways to think about it, it's fine, They'll both be marked correct as long as they're both correct, as long as you didn't make any algebraic or computational errors throughout, like thought process errors. When you enter it in, it doesn't matter really what format it is, it matters what the meaning of it is, or what the value of it is. All right, oh, also, notice underneath these questions, you'll see this not just on this particular one. It says, this is question 5, points possible to unlimited attempts. So all of your questions are going to have unlimited attempts. On actual homework questions, there's 2 types of homework. There's lessons and there's homework. On the homework questions, you can get like 5 tries at something, and you just keep trying. You can still get 100% on it. You can submit it after each try. After that, if you keep guessing, it's going to reduce your score. Like if it takes you 6 tries to get the right answer, instead of getting all 2 points, you get 90% of 2 points if it took you 6 tries to get there, or 80% of 2 points if it took you 7 tries to get there. Each additional point, you get fewer, each additional attempt, you get fewer points, but the first 5 are freebies. Now, I don't want you to not get points from trying something 10 times. What I want you to do is not have to try something 10 times. If you're guessing over and over and you're not getting it right, rather than trying it in, let me try another number, let me try another number. Find some assistance, whether it's post a message to the forum, go to the tutoring center, whatever it is. If you are stuck on something and you're not getting it and you're pretty sure you're right and you've tried it a few times, instead of using up all your tries and like keep going until it's not worth any points anymore, ask questions, get something figured out. And even if it's like wait till class the next day to ask a question. In terms of deadlines, there are deadlines for all of the assignments. You also have, and if you've been into iMath, you might have seen this, what's called in the system late passes. So your late passes, let's see, they show up as little marks that say LP next to some of your assignments. Oh, by the way, if you scroll down, you can see like, module 2, and you can see all the different sections and what's going to be involved. So quantities and covariations of quantities lesson, due Thursday the 13th at 11:59 p.m. Late pass allowed. So each of you right now has 20 late passes in your iMath account, or you will as soon as you make an iMath account. What these late passes are is you can do the homework late and still get full credit. You can do it past the deadline. You have, each of them extends your deadline, but if you use a late pass, you have 72 extra hours to do your homework. So whether it's you were sick, you got really busy, you just didn't have time, you're not understanding it yet, whatever the reason is, you don't have to like, hey, can I get an extension on the homework? You have the late pass for that, so you can just do it on your own. You still get full credit. You just got 20 of those to use for the semester. Now, I will say this, as a bonus, if you do your homework on time, if you get it all done, each of the late passes that you have left at the end of the semester, when I'm calculating your grade, I'll put as an extra credit point into your homework portion of your grade. So if you didn't use any, that's 20% extra in your homework. It won't go over 100%, but if you're sick, please use it so you can get your homework, but if you don't use it, you'll have more points at the end of the semester. So it's up to you if you want to use it or not use it, like save it for extra credit or do your homework assignment. I suggest using it to do your homework assignment because that'll raise your grade more. There's a lot of homework assignments, but all these late passes, it's just so that you have the freedom to adjust as needed, because I know everybody's busy. There's a lot of people that are sick, or some things come up. Like it's like all of a sudden you have to like go take care of somebody else. Or your job needs you to come in for an extra shift because everybody called out, or whatever it is. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, and I don't want you to be overly stressed out, and I don't want you to have to think, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit sick, I have to email all my professors. Don't worry about it. If you're not here in class, like I said, I'll have videos of the lectures that are going on, and we can catch you up later. If you're missing an assignment, if you don't understand the assignment because you missed class or just because you didn't get it, whatever the reason is, make it up. My goal is for you to learn the material by the end of the semester, not to try to force a rigid, like, this must be learned by this date and this is that date. I have a schedule set out so that we'll finish by the end of the term, But I want to give you a little bit of flexibility within that so that it's not overly stressful. Like if 12 things have to all be due on one day with all your classes you're signed up for, I don't want you to say like, well, I'll just skip this assignment and try to go on. I want you to find the time to do it sometime. But if it has to be a day later than originally anticipated, it can be that, and that's fine. And I don't want to penalize you for that. I want to help you get through this, and I want you to learn all of the material. So it's, you know, it's not meant to be like, oh, it's free form and I can do the assignments whenever I want. Not quite, because you'll really get behind if if you just kind of try to save everything for later. But that said, make your best decision on when you can do things that'll fit in your schedule without making yourself sick, without missing out on important things that you're needed for, whatever it is. All right, so let's see. So the last thing I want to show you on this iMath site is the forum. So the calendar's at the top, and you can see what's on here. I'll talk a little bit more about upcoming assignments that are listed before we leave. But this forums link here. So there's nothing in it right now, but there's a forum for every single module. Somebody else set these up and they didn't title them symmetrically, so that's kind of annoying. But in any case, forum for module 2, rate of change. If you are just going to this manually to read through what people have asked, you can click on the forums link there. You can make a new forum post. There's none there right now. Oh, I think I can't quite see what you do because this is my fake student account. But let's say that I was working on this lesson here. Let's see. Actually, I don't know if it's set up to be in this lesson. All right, I'm working on this lesson. There's this question about a house and a car, and I don't know why people have a blue car, and I wanted to ask a question about this. There's 2 links at the bottom. Message the instructor about this question, post this question to the forum. So, I want to post this question to the forum. It's a whole question with the diagram and a car and a house and everything, and everybody has slightly different numbers, and this isn't showing up right now, but when you click on that to post something to the forum, it automatically comes up with, let me make this a little bit bigger, with what question you're talking about, what the topic it is, and the entire question here, other than this animation, doesn't show up, at least on mine, very well. But what's the expression 140 minus x represent? But it has the whole problem pulled into it, so that, because it's annoying to try to repeat what a whole long math problem was talking about. If you have a question about a problem, click on the link. It'll send the whole thing into the forum, because like I said, the numbers vary from person to person. The overall question types are going to be the same. You can post your questions there. I'll be answering questions there. Avinash will be answering questions there. And feel free to answer one another's questions also. You were just working on something and maybe you were like hoping somebody had answered your post and you saw that somebody else had asked a question like, oh, I just figured that out. It took me a while, but finally I figured out all you have to do is like, it's just talking about this distance here, so I have to subtract. Whatever it is that you just figured out, if you can kind of explain to one of your classmates, it makes the forums more active, interesting, useful. The more of us participate in it, the more people contribute, asking questions and answering questions, the more useful it is as a resource for all of us. So, I didn't need help with my homework, but I'm willing to help out. But if you see something, I'm not the only person that knows how to answer questions in here. I'm hoping that as we go on, lots of people are able to answer questions and help one another. So, last thing I wanted to mention then, as I said, let me just get out of that. Back to the top here. These due dates that were on the calendar. There we go. So this Learn the System, LN, it's just an abbreviation for what it's. LN is for lesson. This Learn the System, and then this 2.1. What I'd like you to do, like this is, we just kind of looked at it, it's just kind of learn how iMath AS works. The deadline is set for tomorrow. Please do it. I don't want you to use a late pass on doing that one. If it happens, it happens, but try to do that. And then 2.1, this is a lesson about quantities and covariation of quantities. It says it's due on Thursday by the end of the day. Now, in class on Thursday, we're going to be talking about all of that and more, because this is kind of the very first, beyond the introduction to how the textbook works section. But rate of change from a covariation of quantities perspective. Like I said, there's some multiple choice, there's some not multiple choice. This one's a multiple select all that apply. Tick off as many boxes as makes sense here. And these lessons, the things that are called lessons, are not the same as homework. There's lessons and there's homework. And there's, for most sections, there's both, you'll see. This 2.1, the only one you see right now is the lesson part. But this is kind of, it has the text kind of, I'm pointing at my computer screen, has the text built along with it to kind of introduce what the concepts are. So in a sense, what I want you to do is look over the material and try some of this before you come to class on Thursday. We're going to be using some of these both as, part of class, like learning the material, but also to make sure we all know how iMath works and how to get to the various things we need to do in class on Thursday. And notice it has like quantity. Quantity is an attribute of an object or situation you can imagine measuring or assigning a number to. The value of the quantity is a specific measurement. So we have the values, just the number part, and then the quantity, which is the thing that you're measuring and counting it with that number. And then it talks about fixed and varying quantities and gives you some questions to make sure you understand what fixed versus varying quantities are in a specific situation. True, false questions, but you can see it's a lot of a car driving in a house. And somebody tried to catch the car? I don't know. But in any case, if you want to think about what was going on during the animation, we can talk about what's fixed and what's varying and how to measure those, whether they're a specific number or a number that's going to involve a variable. A variable is something that we use to represent a quantity that's varying. The value of a quantity that's varying, we call it a variable. So just as a quick thing to note, probably many times in math classes, anything that's like an X or a Y, you call it a variable, even if it's just something that's like, well, suppose that B is 9. Well, then B isn't a variable, B is 9, whatever it stands for. Y equals mx plus b. B is not varying if you say that B is 9. It's just a symbol that's representing whatever 9 might be, so it's a constant. And we have different types of letters that we use in math. There's some constants that we have, something that's representing a constant value. And sometimes those, instead of calling them a constant, we call them a parameter. Kind of depends on the person who's explaining it. But a variable is actually meant to represent something whose value can vary depending on the situation. So lots of times you're solving the equation and it just has one answer that wasn't really a variable. It was just an unknown, and you solve for its value, which is one particular value. So the term variable has kind of been misused a lot so that it doesn't have a meaning. But if you think about variable, vary, it should be something that's changing. So when you're dealing with equations of lines, the y's and the x's are typically the variables that you're using in there. When one changes, so does the other, covariation. And those are varying quantities, or maybe we're using the line to represent something like your distance from wherever you started as time goes on, which both of those quantities are varying, so we assign variables to stand in their place. But in any case, this lesson kind of goes over the definitions as you go through it. Here's an explanation of variables and what they mean and what they don't really mean. There's another story. Finally, we're on from the car to a Ferris wheel. And we'll be using cars and Ferris wheels a lot because they have different sorts of patterns for motion. Circular motion versus linear motion. The circular motion has a lot to do with trigonometry. So we're just introducing the idea of the Ferris wheel things now, and we'll put some more trig stuff to it much later in the class. But we can still measure the changes that are going on and how they're changing without having a specific trig formula to talk about it. Diver jumping off a platform. This is pretty extensive, but it is a whole lesson with some questions to answer. So as I said, this is this is due by the end of Thursday. This is that 2.1 LN 2.1 lesson that shows up in the calendar. You don't have to have it all finished before class on Thursday. It's due by the end of Thursday. But what I'd like you to do is at least look at it, answer some of the questions, and in class, because it's the beginning of the semester, in class we're going to do a few of them together, and maybe you will have already finished by then, and that's okay. That'll help, if you're sitting by someone, you want to talk to them, it's like, oh yeah, I was working on this last night. This just means blah, 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 whatever it might mean. That, if you've looked at it before, so you know what's going on, that can make for some good class discussion. We can get farther ahead, but do what you can in terms of this lesson 2.1. And I'll open up a few additional, let's see, where was I? Let me just go back to this main page. Oops. Where does it have? It logged me out apparently. And there we go. But on this online homework, again, calendar, am I on student view? Yeah. Learn the system, do that one before Wednesday night. This lesson 2.1, try that before class on Thursday. You don't have to answer all the questions, but see what you can figure out. Read some of it, get kind of a head start on what we're going to be talking about. And then in class on Thursday, we're going to, like I said, we're going to try some of this. So bring a laptop, bring your workbook if you have it. If you want to write in your workbook, we're going to take a look at some of the activities in there as well, because we're not only going to be going over this 2.1, but also the next couple of sections. So if you want to get ahead, and this is what I'm going to open up, you'll see more items on the calendar. You're going to see some things for 2.2 and 2.3 also appear sometime today or early tomorrow. But for now, focus on those, and I'll talk more about this in class on Thursday, but also that pre-calculus assessment diagnostic test there. This is not part of your grade. It's just a data collection thing, but just when you have a chance to do it, do your best. Let's see, does it say? I forget how many questions it is. Blah, 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 blah. It's not like 100 questions. I think it's like 25 questions. I haven't looked at it in a while. But just do your best on it. Don't try to get 100% by looking up stuff to try to figure out. I just want to know kind of where you're at, so that we can figure out what's going on during the course of the semester and see if we're teaching you the things that we need to teach you. So I saw a question back. Yes?
So we can't sign up for the website until we get our code from the book?
You can do it one of two ways. You can either go to the bookstore and buy a book and get a code and scratch off that way, or you can pay on the website to get access and get your book mailed to you. But you'll get instant access to the website if you do it that way. So but you have to pay before you get access to it in either case. It's just, do you want to go to the bookstore and buy it, or do you want to buy it online and wait for your book? And you can do it either way. Either way will work. And like I said, once you have access to the website, you have access to the online version of the workbook. So you have access to all the materials, even if your physical workbook isn't quite here yet. It's up to you which works best for you. But please try to get this taken care of in the next, day or two. Other questions before we go for today? All right, thank you so much. If you do have any individual questions, message me in Canvas. Talk to me now. I will see you soon.